Welcome, everybody. Welcome to the Transition Support Session. We're excited to have you here today. We're going to explore some fantastic tips and advice on mental capacity, assessment, and decision making. Our expert speaker has loads of valuable insights to share, so feel free to ask questions and join the conversation through the Q&A feature. So let's dive in and make the most of the session today. My name is Debbie Westlake. I'm a project manager supporting the SAND program across DCC, and this includes managing and supporting the webinars across the directorates. I have 2 sons in the stage of life, and I'm passionate about it. We have some guidelines. We're unable to discuss individual situations here. However, you are welcome to contact us separately via the various emails. For general questions, please do use the questions and answers section, and we will address them on our website after the session. If we have time, we'll answer some afterwards as well. So just to recap, after the session, you'll have access to a link of the recorded session in due course when we get there, when we're able to get it up on the website. The presentation will be shared with all attendees afterwards via an email, and the Q&As will be up on the website as well. So let's welcome our speaker as he comes to talk to us about mental capacity and decision making. I'm going to welcome Leonard. Leonard is a team manager and practice lead for mental capacity and best interests for disabled children's services and targeted support. Leonard is a dedicated leader and advocate for the rights of disabled children. As a practice lead for mental capacity and best interest, Leonard plays a pivotal role in shaping how Devon supports young people with disabilities as they transition into adulthood. His work focuses on safeguarding their rights and liberties, ensuring that their practice evolves to meet the complex needs and with dignity and respect. We also have Jonathan Mitchell on the call as well, who's the Service Manager for Disabled Children's Targeted Support and Designated Social Care Officer for SEND, the DCSO. Jonathan Mitchell is a strategic and creative thinker known for driving innovative approaches in social care. And as a Service Manager for Disabled Children's and Designated Social Care Officer for SEND, John leads efforts to enhance support for children and young people with special educational needs and disabilities. His leadership is instrumental in shaping inclusive, forward-thinking services that make a lasting difference to the lives in their lives. So, a quick look of what we'll be talking about today. First, we'll go over what Mental Capacity Act, what it is, and what it means for young people, parents, and carers. And we'll also talk about best interests and how we decide what's best for someone who might not be able to make or decide those decisions for themselves. And finally, we'll explain when we might need to ask for the court to approve plans and what that process may look like. We'll keep things clear and practical as possible, and there will be time, hopefully, for questions afterwards too. So, over to you, Leonard.
Thank you so much, Debbie. That was such a lovely and welcome introduction. I almost believed for a second there that I'm a famous person. So thank you so much. Today we are diving into mental capacity and future aspirations for young people, or as I like to call it, how not to panic about the future 101. So yeah, let's dig in. Young people in their life journey. In early childhood, we all know that decisions about a child's welfare are predominantly made by parents, carers or guardians, or anyone who's got parental responsibility for that young person. But as young people develop independence, as they become a young person, as they accept themselves in the big wide world, they start gradually to assume greater responsibility for their own choices. This shift is really important. It is quite underpinned by developmental changes that support increasing autonomy and independence. From the age of 16, irrespective of their needs, a young person must be assumed that they have capacity to make decisions which affect them. However, we do understand, we are mindful, we do recognize the crucial role us as parents and carers, the role that we play in providing support, offering guidance, encouragement, and opportunities for our young people to start making their own decisions. But by doing so, a young person is able to develop confidence and the resilience required in preparation for their life journey. A parent's right to make decisions on behalf of their children decreases with age. So, this is quite important to capture. And I'll repeat that again. A parent's right to make decisions on behalf of their children decreases with age. This is a very important milestone for our young people, where decision making is now guided by the principle of informed consent from the young person in their own right. Protection and rights. Young people who lack the capacity to make their own decisions about care arrangements have a right to protection from being deprived of their own liberties without lawful authority. So that's important. Without lawful authority. This is through safeguards aimed at protecting young people's rights and freedoms. A parent can only consent to their child being deprived of their liberty if it is normal for a child of that age. And again, if there are restrictions above this level, they have to be agreed with the young person if they have capacity. But if they do not, we will need to seek authorization from the Court of Protection. So just to give you a bit of context and welcome you to the Mental Capacity Act. Supporting young people's decision making, the impact. Every young person is unique. They've got their own unique needs and interests. We understand that the capacity of young people to make informed decisions is influenced by a range of factors. From the age of 14, we begin to assess a young person's ability to consent to their care and the support that's in place for them. The crux here is early assessment so that we are able to identify the level and the type of support each individual requires to participate meaningfully in decisions affecting their lives. What we will do is the following. We will talk with you about your young person. We'll also spend time with the young person and we'll try to look at ways which might help young people become ready and steady to make decisions in the future which affect their lives. This often starts very small, and this can, for instance, start by making choices, small choices about how they want to spend some of their pocket money or where they want to go, what they want to do, who they want to spend time with. However, effective planning for all of this is essential to ensure young people are given the opportunity to develop and exercise decision making skills. When we are assessing and planning with young people or those approaching young personhood, we'll often directly work with the child or the young person. This is often through one-to-one conversations, and this may also include observations across various settings. Why we do this is for one purpose, really, that we need to gain understanding, deeper understanding of their needs, their strengths, their aspirations, and this helps us work with them and those supporting them to set goals which matter to the young person. So now that I've given you a bit of an introduction and preparation in terms of what we are really here for today, understanding the mental capacity. I'll give you the context in terms of what are we really looking at, what are we focusing on today. So there is a age limit that we need to think about today that I want you to really go back home with today, the age of 16 years. This is where young people are now recognized in their own right, that they are young people who are able to make decisions in their own right, and that is within the law. So we have got the Mental Capacity Act of 2005, which is often known as the MCA. And this provides the vital legal framework designed to protect and empower individuals who may lack the capacity to make certain decisions for themselves. And this applies to adults and young people starting from the age of 16 and over. And this piece of legislation is there to ensure that the young person's rights are upheld, their freedoms and best interests are upheld, particularly when decisions about their care and support may impact their liberty. The Act sets out a very clear and defined approach we must follow where young people do not have mental capacity. This requests us to consider a number of key elements when determining whether someone is being deprived of their liberty under Article 5 of the European Convention on Human Rights. The law provides these safeguards where there is a deprivation of liberty in order to protect individuals' rights. So that's the most important thing, that is about protection. This is aimed at ensuring young people are protected and that their liberty is not deprived without careful and ongoing consideration. So you might be wondering, yeah, you've told us all of this about the context and the legal framework. Where do we start? So the Mental Capacity Act, as I have said, and I'll reiterate again, is there to protect the liberties and freedoms of young people who are not able to consent to their planning. When there is reason to believe that a young person may lack capacity, practitioners must consider two key questions, which are the starting point. So I'll explain these two key questions. The first one is we need to consider if the young person is under continuous supervision and control. That means they are always monitored, they're always supervised. If they have to leave, they have to be followed. This test is crucial in ensuring that all young people with cognitive impairments are afforded the legal protections they deserve when their liberty is at stake. What this means is we will explore if the young person, for example, needs constant or frequent supervision to prevent them from harming themselves if they are not left alone. But even if they request it on their own, or their ability to make choices also is also impaired. Secondly, we also have to consider and ask the question, is the young person free to live? Being free to live means that the young person can leave their home, school, or other settings if they choose, and no one can stop them or follow them, or they can bring them back. Where the answer to both these two questions is the person subject to continuous supervision and control, and is the person free to live, and the answer is yes, then we have established that the young person is and we've also established that the young person is a cognitive impairment that impacts their capacity to make informed decisions. Then it will be necessary for us to consider if there is reasonable cause to suspect they lack the mental capacity. We know, we are very much aware that this is not very simple in any shape or form, and many restrictions are designed to safeguard young people. However, despite the aim, this may still constitute a deprivation of liberty, even if the restrictions are well intentioned and they appear reasonable. This is not saying that we are doing something wrong, or the restrictions are wrong, or they're not required, but rather this sits as a function which supports the protection of the young person's rights and freedoms. We also do recognize that some young people will have significant physical and health-related needs, and therefore we all need to think very carefully about the care and support which is being provided and how this can be adapted to increase the young person's choice and freedoms. This can be complicated, and we know it. And we know, and we have to be very careful in terms of how we balance between ensuring safety and respecting the autonomy that is required for young people. So like any other legal instrument, there have to be value. There has to be a value base. There has to be some principles that support the act itself. So we do have principles, five of them, five principles that really support the Mental Capacity Act. And these are found in Section 1 of the Mental Capacity Act of 2005. These principles must be followed by anyone making decisions or acting on behalf of a person who may lack capacity. They are designed to safeguard individual rights and promote independence wherever possible. So I'll take you through each principle and just give you a bit of an insight on what they really mean. So the first principle is the presumption of capacity. So as it says, we have to start by assuming that any person above the age of 16, they have capacity to make their own decisions unless it is clearly established otherwise. Capacity, I'll explain in two ways. Capacity should be decision specific, meaning that we have to assess in terms of a particular decision. Secondly, it has to be time specific, meaning that it relates to a particular time. So those two things are quite important when you are assuming capacity for a young person. Individuals who may require support to make or communicate decisions, this does not alone mean that they lack capacity to make decisions. And what is important as well that you need to be aware of or challenge when you need to is the person who is alleging or is really expressing fully that this person does not have capacity. The burden of proof lies on their end. So that is something you should be very cognizant of as well. So we'll move on to the second principle, which is support to make decisions. A person is not to be treated as unable to make a decision unless all practicable steps to help them have been taken without success. This principle ensures that individuals are not prematurely or incorrectly deemed to lack capacity. Support may include the following, but not limited to the following, of course. One, using accessible communication methods, for example, the easy read formats, like the letters that we sent out when we are working with you on the mental capacity assessment itself, sign language, the use of visual aids, the use of AAC devices, and so forth and so on. Involving individuals who are trusted by the young person and the family, who know the person very well, adjusting the times and the acoustics of setting where you are meeting with the young person for sessions. Then there are also things that happen on the day, for example, addressing temporary conditions like if there is anxiety or there is fatigue or there is illness or there is pain on that particular day. Then you have to really make adjustments on that day to promote the young person to engage with the assessment. So those are some of examples that we talk about when you're talking about support in terms of helping the young person to engage with the assessment. The third principle is the right to make unwise decisions. So I can ask this question to you, all of you who are listening right now. Uh, think about yourself. Take yourself back when you were maybe 17 or 16 or 18. There are things that you did or there were decisions that you made that when you think it right now, you might maybe get goosebumps, or you would think, "Oh my God, what was I thinking?" And you won't do that again now, of course. So a person cannot be labeled or considered that they lack capacity simply because they make a decision that others consider unwise. So everyone has got a very different value base. We've got different belief systems and preferences, and that needs to be captured very well and considered within the assessment. The right to make unwise or unconventional choices is a key aspect of our personal autonomy. So that needs to be respected and also recognized. The fourth principle, which is one of my favorite, is the best interest. Any act that is done or decision made on behalf of a person who lacks capacity, it has to be in their best interest. While the act does not define best interest precisely, it provides guidance on how to determine them. I'll give you examples how the Mental Capacity Act of 2005 gives us guidance in how best interest should be conceptualized. What it says is we have to involve the person as much as possible in the process. We need to consider their past and present wishes and value their thinking, value their beliefs, value their feelings. We have to take into account the views of family members and the carers and those with an interest in their welfare. We also need to assess whether the person is likely to regain capacity in the future. Lastly, we have to avoid assumptions based on age, based on appearance, their condition, and their behaviors. The last principle, which is number 5, the least restrictive option. Before we act out or make a decision, there has to be due consideration on whether the intended outcome can be achieved in a way that is less restrictive of the person's rights and freedoms. we need to consider and choose the option that interferes least with the person's liberty and independence. We have to avoid unnecessary control or limitations, and we need to ensure that any restrictions that are necessary, they have to be proportionate and they have to be reviewed regularly. So these five principles, they form the ethical and the legal foundation for working with individuals who may lack capacity. They promote dignity, they promote respect and empowerment, and what they do is they try to ensure that decisions that are made they are made with care, they are made with transparency, and they are made with accountability. And this dovetails very well with the Devon's practice model, which is the restorative model. We are resilient, we are responsible, we are reflective. So all of these principles, they actually come in and support this number five principle. So now we've talked about the principles, we've talked about the act, and now you have a bit of an understanding in terms of where it's going. But you might be asking yourself, how do these practitioners carry out the assessment itself? I know some of you may have seen a lot of assessments from the council. This can be viability assessments. This can be child and family assessments. This can be the targeted support assessments from the Disability Children Services. The list is endless. So you might be thinking, what's different about this type of assessment we are talking about? So let me indulge you a bit. So the mental capacity assessment is one which is undertaken with the young person, and it involves meeting and working with them. It involves developing their understanding of their needs and the impact of these needs on their capacity to make a decision or a particular decision. So when we are assessing mental capacity, it is often different to other types of assessments, as I've already alluded to, and we need to consider a number of key factors. The assessment will relate to a specific decision, as I said earlier, that it has to be decision specific and time specific. So those two things, they form the basis of our assessment. And if we are going to delay a decision at some point, we need to discuss and reflect this with you before we start the assessment. But let me take you through the assessment itself. There are four key elements that practitioners are going to focus on. That they will work with you as parents and carers, that they'll work with you with the young person as well, and also people who know the person who are supporting them in their sessions. So there's understanding, there's retaining, there's weigh and balance, then there is communicating the decision. So those are the four key elements that the practitioner is going to be assessing on. So let's talk a little bit more about these elements, what they mean. Um, so understanding, let's start with understanding. So this is a very important element in understanding whether the young person does really understand the decision that we are really assessing them on. So a young person only needs to be able to understand and retain the information which is relevant to that particular decision. This must be presented to them in a way which does recognize their cognitive and communication need for as long as possible to make that particular decision. In some cases, this might mean they only need to retain the information for a very short period, whereas in other instances, this might be longer. So it all depends, really. And this will be explained to you by the practitioner when they're doing the assessment. But this does not mean that they must remember or retain this information indefinitely. No. As we move forward through the assessment with the young person, we need to explore with them if they can use or weigh and balance the information to reach that particular decision we are assessing them for. We recognize that this is often complicated and we need to weigh things differently to support them in their understanding so that they're able, we break down things simply in chunks where they can understand. We can try to even transform and transcribe information for as long as it's accessible for them to really assist them in making and weighing up the decision. In many cases, we will work to simplify the information and consider whether the young person is practical experiences of different options, as we know this can help them. The last one, we have to explore if they are able to communicate their decision by any means possible. This can be speech, it can be sign language, it can be in writing, any other format they are comfortable doing so. In some cases, we'll consider their responses, which may inform us about their understanding if they lack capacity about what they want or what they feel. So what is important from these four elements? The young person to be considered that they have capacity, they need to demonstrate that they've understood, they can retain, they can weigh and balance, they can communicate the decision. If there is one element they are not able to demonstrate competence in, then that means they lack the mental capacity to make that particular decision. So it has to be four yeses. If there's one no or there are two no's, that means they're not able to make that particular decision. So it is important to remember that for young people, the threshold for restrictions is where these are likely to exceed the scope of normal parental control. To determine whether a deprivation of liberty exists, we must compare the young person's circumstances with those of a non-disabled peer of similar age and maturity. If the level of supervision and control is significantly greater, this goes about reasonable adjustment, and the young person is not free to leave, then what we are saying is that the acid test is met. However, there are also a few areas where this applies differently. For instance, if a young person is subject to the Mental Health Act of 1983, I think we now have the new Act of 2025, then no further authorization is required, as legal safeguards would already be in place due to the provisions within that Act. Okay, so what you might be wondering, yes, we have assessed, but what sort of support is available to the young person to make their own decisions? So everyone has the right to decide. And as we've been saying for the past couple of minutes, young people aged 16 and over, they have their legal right to make their own decisions, even if those decisions may appear unwise to others. This is protected through the Mental Capacity Act. So we know that everyone is different, and therefore the Act does put particular recognition for that. That capacity can be affected by a range of circumstances. We need to take all reasonable steps to work creatively, to work flexibly, and in a way that's adapted to support the needs of every individual who come across our service. This includes using accessible information, communication methods, using and working together with people that are trusted, adapting the environment and timing of discussions. But however, the assessment must always focus on the young person and their voice, their wishes and their feelings, and the decisions to support them to have a choice and to have control over their lives. This can mean that we take time to work through with them. We have to use different approaches at times. And this may lead us to deciding to delay a particular decision if there is an option to do so. We will also consider if the decision needs to be made immediately, and the impact of the decision as well needs to be explored as how long it might take for a young person to develop or regain their capacity. For families, we'll often talk with you about the support at home and what this looks like. We'll also explore your views, and this will help us to understand how we can best support you on your journey. This helps us have clarity on the restrictions which may be experienced within the young person's home and how to help you also as a family. Throughout our assessment and thinking, we will be asking for information, reports, and assessments that the young person has gone through in the past, and any other documentation from partners across education, health, and social care. We will ask settings such as school and providers to set out and document the restrictions which they are applying and the reason behind them as well as part of a multi-agency approach to assessment and planning. This is all founded on legal requirements, and therefore when we ask for information, it is really very important that this is provided in an order, provided timely in order for us to ensure our assessment is right and also the timely completion of the application to the Court of Protection. It is vital that restrictions are clearly recorded so that these may go on to form part of the planning in the future, which will require authorization. Right, so we're still on the continuum of support available. So advocacy is part and parcel of the support available for young people throughout this process. The Mental Capacity Act provides uh, uh, the 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 existence or the provision of advocacy for young people within this process, and there is an independent mental capacity advocate that can be allocated to work with young people who are going through this process. It's really very helpful to have advocacy, because what it means that they can have someone who can speak up on their behalf if they've struggled to speak up for themselves. Advocates can help young people to understand their choices as well. They will make them understand the support available to them and how they can access it. They also make sure that the person is involved in decisions about their own life. And you might be wondering, who is an IMCA? How do we get about having one allocated to support our young person who is involved in this process? So when we are having the mental capacity assessment, the practitioner will speak to you about it, and what they'll be explaining to you is that the IMCA, as they are popularly known, is a special type of advocate for people aged 16 and above, who might lack capacity to make a specific decision and who might not have family or people that are trusted who understand their needs and can speak up for them. And they may be involved in this process when normally there is a decision about medical treatment that is quite serious, or if a young person is moving to a new care setting, or there are safeguarding concerns involved, or there's a deprivation of liberty where a court of protection application needs to be made by the practitioner. It matters to have in IMCA if there is anyone available who is suitable, who can advocate on their behalf, because we need young people to be ready and steady for the next stage, but to be fully supported of what's going on. So as young people move into adulthood, they may face big decisions. For those who have been following this webinar series, we've had a whole lot of different thematic areas like housing, money, and so forth and so on. So those are very key decisions that young people are going to be making as they become adults, and they will need someone who is able to really support them through this, if there isn't anyone suitable. If they can't make these decisions and they have no one else to represent them, and IMCA steps in to make sure their views, their rights, and their best interests are protected. So that's the support that we have for our young people uh, during this process. So I will take you to the next stage of the whole process. The Mental Capacity Act is being very clear that there has to be an assessment that is done when a young person is 16 and there is indication that they lack capacity. We've talked through about the principles that really support this free legal framework. I've told you or I've explained to you about what to expect within the mental capacity assessment process itself. So your young person is being assessed, and the outcome is they lack capacity to make a particular decision. The next step has to be taken immediately after that decision is the best interest process. So I will take you through about this process now. So this is a meeting that is planned and is a supportive discussion that takes place when a young person is unable to make a certain important decision about their care or about how they want to live their lives or the support they need. So these meetings are required by law under the Mental Capacity Act, and they ensure that any decision made on behalf of someone who lacks capacity are done in their best interest. So that principle number 4, I said, is my favorite earlier. The meeting brings together a team of people who know the young person very well, including professionals from health, from education, from social care, as well as family members, and sometimes advocates that we spoke about just a minute ago, to share their views and work together. The young person's wishes, feelings, and values are central to this conversation, and the aim is always to choose the least restrictive option that still meets their needs. If the plan involves limiting the young person's freedom in a significant way, known as a deprivation of liberty, then it needs to be legally authorized and shown to be necessary and fair. The meeting is usually led by a professional who helps guide the discussion, makes sure everyone is heard, and ensures the young person's voice is included either directly or through someone who represents them. Overall, these meetings are about making thoughtful, respectful, and person-centered decisions that support the young person's well-being in every aspect of their life. So what we need to consider throughout this is the young person's capacity likely to change in the near future. So this will be discussed together as a multi-agency group and also as family and the young person or the people who are representing them. We also explore together their wishes and their feelings and their beliefs and their value base and what they're really looking forward to, what they really want. We also look at what are the views of those who know the young person best. We also consider and explore what is relevant to their circumstances when working out someone's best interests. And lastly, we look at what are the alternatives or what are the options available related to that particular decision that has been assessed. So, when talking about options in a best interest meeting, you might be asking, what really happens in there? What does it look like? So, when we are making decisions for a young person who lacks capacity to decide for themselves, it's important to carefully consider all realistic available options, and we need to choose one that is truly in their best interest. This is guided by principle number 4 of the Mental Capacity Act, which states that any decision made on behalf of someone who lacks capacity must be made in their best interest. Because every young person is unique, what might work for one person does not work for the other one. So to help with this, decision makers often use what we call the balance sheet approach. This is a clear and structured way to weigh up the pros and the cons of each option. This involves just creating a very simple table for each choice. Then we list the benefits of one option on the side, while also looking at the risks and the drawbacks on the other side, while also taking into account the young person's known wishes and views and values and beliefs. This method helps us to ensure that decisions are transparent, they are well documented, and they are legally sound. So it also supports accountability and it helps teams choose the option that best supports the young person's well-being, safety, and rights while being the least restrictive of their freedom and their independence. Importantly, the best interest decisions go beyond just meeting the basic needs. They aim to reflect how the young person would want to live their life, to respect their individuality and dignity, and strike a fair balance between keeping them safe and allowing them as much independence as possible. So that's really quite important. So you might be wondering then, like, yes, we've done the best interest. So what's next? So now we need to start preparing ourselves for the court of protection application. But I want you to understand some key things that happens as part of this process and what that means. So we've talked about how the acid test is met when the young person is under constant supervision and not free to leave, and that there's an impairment of the brain, and we've done a mental capacity assessment. Then there are certain orders that you might want to know in terms of what do they look like. So we've got the DOSE, which is the deprivation of liberty safeguards. That's what they mean. And these are for adults who are older. So that means they are 18 plus. And these are adults that are possibly staying in a care home or they're in a hospital setting. And these are used when someone is not able to agree to their care plan. They can't consent to their care and support in place. And the local authority is able to authorize these restrictions. Then we've got the community dose, or popularly known as the COM dose. These are for young people aged 16 to 17, or adults, again, who are also in community settings like supported living or foster care for young people that are below the age of 18. These are quite extensive and they need to be approved by the Court of Protection. And we normally use them
for transition support for our young people when they are moving to adulthood. You might be asking yourself, why go through all this? This is intrusive. This is quite complex. Why subjecting our young people to this process? The answer to that is very simple. These are safeguards that are in place to protect the rights of young people. The process that is enshrined within the law, within the act itself, it makes it safe for young people. It makes the process fair, and it makes it legal. So families are also involved to make all these three components I spoke about safe, fair, and legal to be met. And the plans are also reviewed regularly as well, and they are all involved in the process. The goal always is to find ways to reduce restrictions and support independence for a particular individual at any given time. So that's the context around the orders. So what to expect when we need to have the Court of Protection to authorize the restrictions in place. So when the young person has been assessed and they are lacking capacity to consent to their care and support in place, and those arrangements are involving continuous supervision and control where they're not free to leave. And what it means, the local authority should apply to the Court of Protection to lawfully authorize this deprivation of liberty. This legal step ensures that the young person's rights are protected and that any restrictions placed on them are necessary and fair. We will write to you and explain in detail what we are seeking the court to authorize. We need to be very clear to the Court of Protection what we are asking them to authorize. And I think what is also important is that the young person needs to be represented throughout. So we spoke about the IMCA as part of the process, but the young person on their own, they're also entitled to independent legal representation. And this is either through a solicitor or, if required, the official solicitor who acts on their behalf when no one else is suitable. The local authority must also appoint a responsible person to make sure that the care plan is followed exactly as approved and that no additional restrictions are introduced without going back to court. This process helps us to ensure that even when a young person cannot make decisions for themselves, their freedom and their dignity are still respected through proper legal safeguards. So what to expect when we are applying to the Court of Protection? So this process begins with a detailed application that includes the young person's mental capacity assessment, the best interest decision, the care plan coming from the best interest meeting that would have been carried out, and any relevant risk assessments that have been completed, and along with a clear explanation of what the local authority is asking the Court of Protection to approve. The Court of Protection will carefully review all of this information to make sure the plan is necessary, is proportionate, and truly in the young person's best interest. The young person is always represented, so I'll reiterate that again, either by a legal professional or through the official solicitor to ensure that their rights and wishes and views are fully considered. A responsible person, again, is also appointed to make sure the care plan is followed exactly as approved without going back to court. If everyone agrees with the plan, the first court hearing is usually very brief. Sometimes they are vacated, but the court still has a duty to examine the details thoroughly, especially where the young person's right to liberty is concerned. After the hearing, there is a special type of meeting called a roundtable meeting that is often held, and this meeting brings together the young person's legal representative, all the professionals involved, and the family members to explore the care plan in more depth, to consider alternatives, and ensure the plan is still the least restrictive option. For young people aged 17 and over, the court additionally will also ask for details about the plan that supports the young person's transition as an adult, including future independence and access to adult services. The court may also ask for more documentation or schedule further hearings to make sure the plan continues to meet the young person's needs and that their rights remain protected throughout. So ultimately, the Code of Protection plays a significant role in making sure that decisions involving restrictions are lawful, are necessary, and appropriate, and they are still centered around the young person's well-being and in future. So agreeing a plan through the court. So once the Code of Protection is agreed that the young person's care plan is necessary, is proportionate, and in their best interest, it can authorize the plan for up to 12 months. It's important to understand that the court is only approving the specific restrictions described in the application, and no additional restrictions can be added later without returning to court for further approval. Even after authorization is granted, professionals must still continue working together to give the young person as much choice and control as possible and review their plans regularly to reduce restrictions and ensure it remains the least restrictive option available. And as we know with life, things can change, such as a move to a new placement, a more restrictive care plan, or the young person objecting to their arrangements, or that there's need to renew the authorization. If all those things happen, what it means is a new application must be made. This includes completing a fresh mental capacity assessment, holding a new best interest meeting, and submitting an updated documents to the court for them to review and authorize. It's essential to remember that court authorization is time limited and it's also specific, and the court plays an ongoing role in reviewing care plans that significantly affect a young person's liberty. This process, the whole process, is designed to protect the young person's rights and ensures decisions are fair and they are proportionate and promote transparency in how care arrangements are being made. So I've been talking a lot. Um, I've been speaking for I think maybe 40 minutes or so, but I will try to summarize briefly what I've been talking about. Number one, turning 16 is a massive legal milestone. At the age of 16, the assumption is that the young person is able to make decisions on their own. Number two, capacity is decision specific and it's also time specific. So a young person might be able to decide some things, but they might not be able to decide others. And they may not be able to decide today, but they may be able to decide and make decisions in the next 7 months or in a year. So nothing is permanent. Everything is decision and time specific. There's also support for young people to make decisions. They have to be given all the practical support available to help them make a particular decision. Then principle number 4 is the best interest principle. If a young person is not able to decide or make a decision on their own, whatever is decided and agreed upon should be in their best interest. Their views, their feelings, their values, they need to be considered as part of this process. Number 5, co-production and multi-agency working. Parents, carers, and advocates, they're experts in the young person's lives, and they should be part of the best interest decision process. Where possible, an IMCA should be appointed if there's no one else appropriate to represent or speak on behalf of the young person. Number 6, planning is crucial. Planning in time is really important. That's why we start our process from the age of 14, especially from the HCP reviews, and also where young people are in receipt of direct payments. When you're doing reviews, we start that process at that time. We think about the future at that point, what sort of support the young person will need, and we start working with that in mind. Number 7, deprivation of liberty. If a young person is under constant supervision and control and they're not free to leave, this may be deprivation of liberty. So I've been talking a lot, and that brings us to the end of our journey through the fascinating world of mental capacity and future aspirations, where the only one thing more complex than the law is trying to decide what we might have for dinner tonight after a long day of PowerPoint slides. But now, before I start aspiring to a nap, I'll hand over to the brilliant Debbie, who will guide us through the next steps, because let's face it, she's the one with the real plan. So thank you so much for your time. Debbie, over to you.
Oh, thank you, Leonard. Thank you. There's so much information to digest, and I think we're going to be watching back the slides just to try and absorb all that information. Thank you, Leonard. There's so much useful information out there, though, and we've just provided some even more links and useful guides for you to have a look at. The first one is the Care Quality Commission on MCA and DOLS overview. And this guide explains how the MCA applies to adults who may lack capacity when DOLS under care settings. We've also got Mind's Guide around mental capacity, acts and deprivation, which offers a user-friendly explanation of the MCA and DOLS and includes how someone might be deprived of the liberty and how authorization works and what rights individuals and families have. SCI, which is the Social Care Institute for Excellence, DOLS at a glance, a concise summary of deprivation of liberty safeguards. And then we've also got NHS Mental Capacity Act, which is a really straightforward guide on the NCA. Lastly, we've got Preparing for Adulthood, the National Development Team for Inclusion. This website is full of really, really useful information. So please do have a look at NDTI. They've got a whole series on preparing for adulthood and some really useful tools and things that you can use as your family, as a school, all sorts of really useful things. So please do have a look at that. Now, I know that in terms of the questions, we have had a huge amount of questions, and we've had two people that have had a look and have been summarizing and is going to be answering them on the website for us in due course. We've had some really good situations and really confusing situations which will need a bit of unpicking, but we will get back to you and answer some of those generic questions as much as possible. So thank you for those, and we will put them up on the website in due course. Finally, and by no means least, this does bring us to the end of today's session, but I just want to say a huge thank you to Leonard for sharing his expertise and clear passion for all that he does around mental capacity. We hope that you found the session really helpful, and we'd love to hear your feedback. Please do take a moment to fill in the feedback form. Your input helps us to improve and shape all our future sessions. As a reminder, the slides will be sent out, and the summary and the Q&A will be on the website in due course. We want to learn from you, so please do get in touch and let us know how we've done. Thank you again for your time today, and we look forward to seeing you next time. All the best. Bye-bye.